All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining another Red Rivers webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about migrating to the cloud. In today's webinar brought to you by Red River, our team's going to be discussing 6 strategies to taking your environment to the cloud. Today, we have Larry Bowles, Chief Cloud Platforms, Thomas Ramirez, Chief Application Architect, Paul Weismer, Design Architect, and Frank Leska, VP of Sales Managed Services on here today. This presentation is brought to you by Microsoft Teams live events. What we would like to tell everybody during the live event, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the right-hand corner in the little Q&A tab. We will be getting to all the questions at the end of the webinar. We've left a few minutes at the end for us to kind of answer those and get to everyone. So without further ado, I'll pass the mic to Larry.
Thank you very much, Gary. Welcome back, everybody, for those who are returning, and welcome to those that are new. Today, we're going to cover the processes and strategies for migrating to the cloud. So happy Halloween Eve, as well as happy Season 2 Mandalorian drop day. Let's get started. So our agenda today, we're going to review our cloud markets, cloud capabilities. We're not going to spend a lot of time on those. And then why migrate to the cloud? What are the benefits? And then we're going to allow Paul and Thomas to dive in deeper into the different migration strategies. We'll wrap it up with a migration review, and then Frank Leska will talk about our current offering that we have around cloud migrations, and then we'll do some Q&A. So our current cloud markets, we service the federal government, state and local education, as well as commercial for cloud migrations. That's commercial cloud as well as government clouds, whether it's Microsoft Azure, GovCloud Commercial, AWS GovCloud Commercial, or Google Cloud Platform. And then what we do end-to-end is we are a true end-to-end cloud company, whether it's consumptive resale at discounted prices off of list for those on-demand CSPs that I just mentioned, and you see at the bottom of the screen here. We have our consulting services, which is our professional services organization that can help you do the assessments, the planning, which CSP, which features and functions is best for your organization, as well as the migrations themselves. And then we have our managed services organization to do sustainment, the monitoring, the service desk, tier 1 through 4 escalation to troubleshoot and resolve problems. So why migrate to the cloud? A lot of people ask me this when I meet with executives or I meet with customers. Why would I want to move to the cloud? Cloud just seems like a big buzzword. Everybody's doing it. I don't understand why. So traditionally, we've done capital expenditure, the perpetual hardware, software licensing on premises for our data center build-outs, whether they're Gen 1 all the way up to Gen 2016 and 2019 and 2020 versions, or even colos. So moving from a capital expenditure model into an operational expenditure model where you're not as focused on spending money to buy new hardware, long procurement cycles for hardware, long procurement cycles for software. Everything is on demand, real time inside of these secure cloud environments. So there are going to be different parts of your migration where you are going to see small capital expenditure savings when you do your migrations to cloud with a variable and operational expenditure to do the migration. But it's just like any other migration you do, even if you're doing it on premises, a Windows desktop refresh or upgrade across your enterprise. There's an operational expenditure that goes up with your labor costs in order to do that upgrade or that migration. But then there's also economies of scale where you have the ability to walk the cloud cake, as we call it in the industry, where you're moving from, it's not just lift and shift of VMs and storage into the cloud, but it's actually optimizing your workloads and your applications into the various platform as a service or software as a service offerings from the CSPs. It also allows you to reduce time to market for your solutions. If your customer comes to you, the in-business unit or finance or HR, and they say, hey, we've got this great database that we use every day. It's the best thing since sliced bread. And you go and you access it, and it's a spreadsheet or it's an Access database. Those are great for small business units, but when it comes to true enterprise in the cloud, they have low-cost offerings in order to make that an enterprise solution with a nice front end to it. So the ability to reduce time to market of solutions versus waiting that 3 to 6 months to buy new hardware, 3 to 6 months to negotiate enterprise agreements with software vendors. It's all there in the cloud, ready on demand. Automation. Automation is a big part of moving to the cloud, where traditionally you have your on-premises environments and you're managing your data center, your private cloud, or you're managing your hybrid cloud into a co-location. facility, and there's a lot of manual tasks that seem to happen with those environments. Some organizations have made the pivot and done a lot of automation of those and orchestration of those environments, but cloud is truly about automation in order to get the economies of scale and allow your workforce to focus on higher value tasks and higher value thinking, leveraging the applications and the data that you put into the cloud, and not so much focused on, let me manage the Windows servers, the Linux servers, the patching, the IaaS, all the traditional things your operations group would do. And then, of course, flexibility. A lot of our customers come to us and they're talking more about multi-cloud. They're talking more about, I've got this in AWS, everything's in AWS, or everything's in Microsoft, or everything's in Google. They want to leverage finished services that are in other CSP providers. So the flexibility to not have vendor lock-in, the flexibility to have data here, services over here in this environment, and securely communicate back and forth to make business decisions on real data. And then walking the cloud cake that I talked about earlier. The cloud journey could start out as a lift and shift. That's the easiest path. But the real value of CapEx savings and normalizing operational expenditures, OpEx, is walking that cloud cake. And we do that all day, every day with our customers. So the 6 cloud migration strategies that Paul and Thomas are going to be talking about today go in line a lot with some of the Amazon Web Services framework. Microsoft has theirs, Google has theirs. We've been very successful in working with customers in this framework. So talking about retire, retain, rehosting, they call it the 6 R's. Replatforming, refactoring, re-architecting, rebuilding, and replacing. These are the things that we're going to talk about at length today. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Paul Weismer. Paul, if you'd like to go ahead and take control. And I'm going to turn my camera off and my mic off.
All right, great. Thanks for that, Larry. Great opening to today's talk. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're excited to kind of dive into some of the specifics here around these rationalization techniques, or the 6 R's as we've laid them out. And the first way to sort of start contextualizing your migration to the cloud is actually something that might seem incredibly obvious, but we need to have this conversation around retiring and retaining, right? So many customers that I've worked with through the years have systems on premise today that they have since moved off of or are in the process of sunsetting. A lot of the business process and the data with those systems has moved into other areas, but the virtual machines themselves might still be running within the environment. So we always like to sort of level set with a conversation around, okay, what are the things that are going to be in scope that we're going to talk about migrating to the cloud, right? So there's always going to be a subset of things that we know that we're not going to have to move, or we know that we're going to keep that might stay on-prem for the time being, or we know that we're going to keep that's going to be part of the conversation around migrating to the cloud. So again, something that seems incredibly obvious, but it's a conversation that oftentimes can be overlooked. And we might, for example, think that every single virtual machine workload that they have on-prem is in scope for migration, when in fact we need to have this sort of baselining conversation around what are we keeping and what might be sunsetting before we start moving workloads to the cloud. Okay, so in terms of the rationalization, or the techniques that we're going to use to get things into the cloud, the most common and the most straightforward of those is rehosting, right? So we've got applications on-prem today inside of virtual machines, inside of containers. We're going to pick up those applications and we're going to move them into a public cloud platform. This is more commonly known as the lift and shift approach, or the lift and shift strategy to starting our cloud journey. And when we're doing this, we are not changing the application itself. So it's literally moving something from one place to another. And we typically will see this approach where we need something with high velocity, right? We need to move a couple hundred servers into a public cloud platform very quickly. This is the strategy that we're going to use. And, we'll talk about, and Thomas is going to get into this a bit, and, we'll talk about the fact that we know we're going to re-architect some of those applications down the line. But for right now, we have a data center contract, for example, that could be coming to an end. There could be some sort of event that's happening inside of the business that's propelling this, and we need this velocity to get out of where we are today with our virtual machines. So like I said, not changing the application themselves, picking them up and moving them from point A to point B. And this works across the virtualization solutions from VMware, Hyper-V, even physical machines. We're taking those things, often using a first or third-party tool set from one of the public cloud providers. We're kind of seeding them out there. We're looking at what you've got in the environment, and we're taking it as is and moving it from one place to the other. Now, application size and complexity matters completely in this scenario. And our fun little analogy that we have with these pictures here is, obviously, if you've got something in containers, this is kind of your RV all ready to go, self-contained. If you've got sort of this three-tiered application that stretches across dozens and dozens of servers, and there's load balancing, there's all these things that we need to account for, that's kind of picking up your whole house off the foundation and moving that into the cloud. So obviously, even though we're not changing the application itself, as the complexity of those applications increases, our ability to sort of, or how we plan and how we do the approach is going to change as well. And just to sort of reiterate what Larry had mentioned earlier, you're moving from capital expenditure to OpEx in this scenario, right? So you're not spending tons and tons of money to do, hundreds of thousands of dollars on hardware, or perhaps even millions of dollars, depending on the size of the organization. You're moving all of that money into something that's a reoccurring monthly cost. Okay, so when we're talking about the rationalizations, right, we talked about either retaining something or sunsetting that, or retiring rather, and then we talked about rehosting, and sort of the cousin to rehosting is replatforming. So what we're doing with replatforming is we're not necessarily changing the application itself. We're not changing the application itself, but we're changing an interaction with the application. So this is kind of the first foray into PaaS services, or platform as a service in cloud. So we're getting our feet wet here with those cloud native services, and although we're leaving the application intact, we're starting to talk to things that are cloud native services. Now, a really common example of this is databases. So we might have an application that's in a virtual machine or inside of a container, and that application needs to talk to some database. So a really common example of this is if, we're talking AWS, maybe we've got to start pointing at RDS, right? So we're going to use the RDS service. If we're talking about Azure, it's Azure SQL. It's leaving the application in place, but starting to talk to some of those cloud native services. So again, kind of our first foray into making that transition from an on-prem environment into cloud, but not quite totally cloud native as the stuff that Thomas is going to get into. And likewise, with applications that require logging and caching, we can start using the cloud services, the platform services, in order to handle that part of it for us, but keeping our keeping our application as is. And our fun analogy in this one is we're changing out, a traditional type socket in favor of putting in USB socket, which is a more modern approach toward things. And with that, I will turn it over to Thomas.
All right, thank you, Paul. All right, so now we get to the fun parts. We're saying we've started with a couple of different ideas of how do we just move things in there, but let's say we do need to do something more significant with the applications. And often, sometimes you'll start with a lift and shift, maybe take advantage of a little of the capabilities of cloud. And sometimes you may say, no, we need to start with doing some significant changes to our application first. There's a lot of reasons that you might need to do this. You may say, hey, we've got a monolith, and it's very difficult for us to make changes to, especially if you have regulatory things or other things within your business that make the rules change. You need to be able to adjust. You want to be able to adjust more quickly, but you don't need to replace the whole thing. It's working pretty well. There's just a couple of pieces. We can help, look into the code and see, hey, are there pieces that we can split off where we're not doing the whole house, but maybe we're doing a kitchen remodel to stick with the analogy. And so you can see kind of on the left, we have the starting point of things are a bit messy. They work, or they used to work, but now they're broken, or they're not really fulfilling the needs that you have as a business. And you need to get to that, clean model where, the spoons are where your wife is looking for them, all of those sorts of things, where you're really going to meet your client's needs, meet the business needs. And so There's a lot of different directions that we can go for modernization. We can, possibly take pieces of the application and turn them into microservices. We can help, add facade patterns and other technical things, look through those details, work with your engineers. There's, other replatforming type activities that may happen there. The database was mentioned, but there's other pieces and things that are available in the clouds, lambdas and so on, different sorts of hosting that can, save money, reduce, the OpEx expenses that you have. Also, it allows us to break a large job into a series of smaller jobs. You say, hey, we can't afford to be down for this long or to wait for certain parts for us to do everything all at once. We want to take things a piece at a time. And so we can focus on, hey, what's the most important to you, and work on refactoring those, re-architecting them. Is it what saves you the most money? Is it, hey, we need to take advantage of what Kubernetes offers, but only on this piece. This piece of our application really gets hit during certain periods of time, and we need to make sure that it can be more flexible. We don't want to set up, a huge server farm for the whole monolith, and it really wasn't built to handle, that kind of traffic anyway. We want to break pieces out and have those work. Well, this is a great candidate for refactoring, for re-architecting, so that we can give you the benefits without, as much waiting, and, really provide you the business improvements. The next one is rebuilding, and this is really, hey, we need to start over. There's a lot of different reasons to do this. It may be that your legacy is very difficult to work with. We've worked with clients who had something on the mainframe, and it, took them hundreds of hours, thousands of hours to make trivial changes, things that they had to do pretty regularly. And I said, we can't afford to keep messing with this. Or you have some other monolith. It doesn't have to be, all the way back into the mainframe days. But you say what we have isn't going to work for the future. It's very expensive to maintain. It may be something where the skill sets aren't there anymore. We've even had clients where they said, hey, we've got this, VB6 library. It's some DLL. We can't reverse engineer it. We don't have the source code for it. We've no idea. We don't have documentation for it. We don't have anybody who remembers anything. We just know what it's supposed to do, and we need to start over. We need to make changes in there. If things aren't suitable for a modern architecture, again, the mainframes, it's much harder to move those into a modern architecture, and it may be time to cut the cord. You can't take advantage of the cloud technologies and the savings model that Larry was talking to, and you want to make those changes. A lot of places have had very brittle systems. We've seen this with classic ASP, where they've got your classic spaghetti code systems of things calling each other and changing things, and your system becomes very brittle. You make a change in one place, you find out that you broke 4 other places. You say, okay, we can't mess with this anymore. It actually becomes very expensive sometimes just to try to maintain what you have, and you're better off starting clean, architecting it for cloud, architecting it to take advantage of microservices when those are indicated, for other architectures when those are more suitable for your needs. And the other really important piece is, if there's something that is available in COTS, maybe that's the way to go. But if there isn't, then we can talk about rebuilding, and we're happy to jump in and do the end-to-end. We have everything from requirements through M&O that we can provide. We can go with either a waterfall approach to an agile approach to anything in between. We've actually had a lot of success with all of these different models, and can meet our clients where you're comfortable and to help you get to where you want to go with your practice. And then finally, there's replacing. You've been using this great system that was developed in-house years and years ago, and it works well. It's been working really great, but there's some new features that you really wish that you had, that you could add. And we come in, we look at it, and we say, that's a word processor. We could, help you get into O365 or some other tools. There are some other cases where there are really great tools that are already out there that are either, a full-on COTS, or maybe it's software as a service offered by, one of our partners. We can help you move into those directions, do any little bit of customization or integration that needs to happen. We want to make sure that we're not just selling you, a brand new application that we build from the ground up because we can. As much as I love that. That's what I've been doing for a long time. But we want to make sure that it's something that makes sense for you. And this is why we would come up with, maybe replacement is the right option. There may be great tools out there that really meet your needs. And so, analogy is we're just getting rid of the old house, buying the new one. And so, as a quick overview, there's a lot of different indicators for these approaches that will work with you as we do that analysis, again, that Larry was talking about as our starting point. And then we recognize that there's a lot of challenges with each of them, and some of them are technical and some of them are not. You look at the replacing and rebuilding, we have organizational change management as part of the challenges. A lot of times you have your own internal people are so used to the way that they've always done something. Being able to see outside of that can be really challenging. I've had places where we went and I was, working with the end users to see what is it that they're doing? How are they doing their work every day? And I remember one lady on one of my first projects ever, and she was trying to get things from a paper form onto her computer form. And so I was asking her how the process worked, and she said, well, okay, the first field here, I go to the third tab on the second page and I go down 4 spaces and I put it over here. And then the second field, I go back to the first tab, and, she was bouncing all over the place. And I asked her, well, wouldn't it be easier if I built you a system where you would just do them in the same order as they are on the page? And she looked at me very confused and said, well, do whatever makes sense to you. I'll just get used to it. And she was a very sweet lady, and I loved working with her, but it's like, we can do it better. It can be more efficient. It can better meet your needs. It can be less error prone. But a lot of times you'll have to really work with your users to get used to the new thing. They'll often be afraid of it. Even, hey, this will really save time. And a lot of people will say, save time means you're eliminating my job. And often that isn't what people want to do. They say, hey, no, we've got good people. We just have too much work. We've seen lots of that, and we can help with some of those pieces of how do we communicate this well to your community? How do we, help prepare? And so with that, that ends my piece. Let me hand this off to Frank. Oh, hold on. Sorry. I had one more slide. Sorry. There are some other considerations that we need to make sure that we're taking into consideration, that we're looking at very carefully to make sure that we have success. One of them is executive support. If we don't have, the executive support, we know that we're going to have a lot of struggles when you say, hey, we need to have a certain amount of funding for this. We need to make sure that they see the same vision, that they say, yes, this is the direction we want to go, that it's part of the larger vision. If we say, hey, we want to, do a replacement of this, or we want to do a rebuild, it may be that the execs have already got a plan. We want to make sure that we're in line with that so that we're not at cross purposes, that we're working together as a team. Similarly with management support, if you're in there and you're a salesperson, or you're there and you're working on this thing and you're frustrated with how it works, if your management doesn't have the same vision as you, they're not going to want to make that jump, or they're not going to want to do it in the same way. They need to be on board. We have to have alignment all the way from the top down so that we are able to have success, that everyone's pulling together, that we can be a team. Red River is very about being a team with you and not just coming in and doing work. And the last one, which is something I really haven't talked about, although it did show up on the last slide, is not forgetting about the data. There's a lot of different interactions with the data, how you're using it, what you're using it for. Could even be with interfaces with other applications. You want to make sure that your data migration is part of your application migration. What does it mean for downtime? How do we get the data to where it really needs to be? So a lot of challenges there, a lot of complications potentially there. Those are great areas where we're very happy to work with you. All right, and with that, I will hand this off to Frank.
Great, looks like I have control. Larry, Paul, Thomas, thank you. Thank you for the excellent presentation and really a kind of straightforward, kind of pragmatic approach to kind of rationalizing, taking a look at what potential strategies a customer could have when looking to move their workloads to the cloud. So, and totally agree with you. We have to talk about, engagement with the key stakeholders in the organization, and we've obviously have thought about that. And one way to really get started, okay, with this whole effort is through a program or an offering we have called Cloud Start. Okay, so this is an opportunity for you to have a real professional kind of assessment, okay, and a way for our teams to collectively gain a really good understanding of not only the technical aspects of the migration, the process, and understanding the workloads and the dependencies between those workloads, things like that, but also, again, meeting with the key stakeholders, establishing those outcomes that are going to be meaningful and to the business. So all of these things are discussed and shared inside this Cloud Start workshop, okay, that we offer. And as part of this webinar, and a part of thanking you for taking the time out of your day and spending time learning more about what some of your options are with regards to migrations, we'd like to offer every webinar attendee a 50% off of our Cloud Start offering. So, I think we've done a lot of studies, and we feel like we're very competitive right out of the gate, with our Cloud Start offering and our assessment offering. So we're going to even make that more aggressive to kind of earn your business and potentially help you achieve what some of your desired outcomes are in moving or migrating your workloads to the cloud. So take advantage of that if you can. Reach out to us at connect@redriver.com. My name again is Frank Lusko. I'm the VP of Services Sales for the organization, and would be happy to talk to you or put you in front of any one of these fine gentlemen to talk more about that. With that, I'd like to go ahead and get us started with some of the questions I think that we might have.
Absolutely.
All right, thanks, Gary.
Absolutely. Thanks, Frank. Yeah, we do have a few questions lined up for this presentation. And thank you again, each of you, for the good details and information about moving to the cloud. So the first one would be, how do we get started with the cloud migration?
Yeah, well, I'll take that one because it's just what I just discussed. I strongly encourage that, we look at our Cloud Start offering, our assessment, and helping you make those decisions around those workloads and putting together a solid professional plan, one that we can count on for, the most successful potential outcome, of the project itself. So Cloud Start, okay, is the way to go.
Perfect. Thank you, Frank. The next question we have here is, as part of a refactoring or rebuilding, can you help us set up the DevOps?
I can take this one. Absolutely. DevOps is, one of the modern practices, and there's a ton of benefit for it. There's a reason why it's so popular. It's one of those buzzwords that's more than just a buzzword. We're familiar and comfortable, have a lot of experience with, Jenkins and Azure DevOps and other tools that are out there, and are very happy to help get that set up, get the automated testing, that whole end-to-end, the CI/CD stuff that you hear about is not just a myth, and we're happy to help get that set up.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And we have one last question. When we do a lift and shift, will we have an upfront idea of reoccurring costs?
I could take that one.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a great question, and thanks for asking it. So one of the reasons that we do an assessment is not just to understand from a technical perspective what are the dependency mappings between the application and what sort of the breadth of what the initiative looks like, but we really want to make some actionable decision around costing. So the tool sets that we use to perform those assessments will actually help us map out those costs. It'll help us map out the size of the infrastructure based on the CPU and storage demands. So that is baked into doing the overall assessment. And it's something that most customers, when we're approached, they want to know the predictability of moving to the cloud is cost predictability, right? So that's one of the reasons that we really recommend doing these assessments, is that you have an idea of what that month-to-month recurring cost will look like, as well as what that dependency mapping looks like, as well as what that overall sort of estate will look like when you move things from on-prem to the cloud. So great question.
Hey, Gary, it looks like we have an anonymous question in the window. Do you mind if I field that one?
Absolutely. Are we going to talk about IE and or IoT as part of this?
So IOE and IoT. So we didn't cover those two items. However, if you go to redriver.com and you click on our capabilities and go to cloud, you'll actually see a use case for IoT that we did for a large petroleum manufacturer inside of the cloud. Take a look at that use case and feel free to reach out to us at connect@redriver.com if you want to do a follow-up and talk about IOE and IoT and our capability for sensor management, data collection, data analysis inside of the various CSPs and what we've done in the past and how we can help you with those initiatives.
Yep. Gary, are there any other questions?
That is all the questions that we do have. So we'll wrap that up.
Yep.
I do want to remind everybody that we will be having another webinar following this three-part series on November 20th, talking about a well-managed cloud, supporting, securing, and optimizing your cloud investment, which we'll be sending out information to everyone who attended today for the webinar. So again, Thomas, Paul, Larry, Frank, thank you so much for your time and have a great day.
Cloud is the way.
Thank you.
That's the way. Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.